Hey guys, this is miicrow. I wanted to make a quick build guide on what I think is the strongest build in the game currently, and that is Hatchet SNS. I have seen people consistently drop 60 to 70 kills per OPR with this build, and it seems like no other build even comes close to its damage potential right now, and that's basically because Hatchet is like giga broken tracking wise. Hatchet with the aim lock change never misses a social distance anymore, so you can always close distance. Uh, Berserk with Keen Berserk is a really good source of damage and is really only countered by IGVG, which is not as prevalent in OPR right now since people don't really have the necessary perks to make IGVG work. And then they buffed the heck out of Raging Torrent, so it actually tracks people now. What this build really excels in is it excels in stamina trades. By that I mean you can't actually run away from this build if this build's autoing you because it will track you through your dodges, and they don't have to use stamina with Hatchet SNS to keep up with you using stamina, which inherently makes it impossible to beat this by just trying to stam trade it. The major advantage you could have against this build really struggles if the other person is blocking, because Hatchet and Sword and Shield both have like terrible damage versus people that's blocking. But Sword and Shield can go for some heavy attack stuff where you go for heavy attack and upheaval, and that can break your blocks. You have to be a little wary of that. But if someone's hatching you, the trick is to not run away. It is just to hold block and then hope that other people on your team bail you out, because there's no way you're running away from this. So getting into the build here, we're going with a glass cannon sort of setup. We're going light with 350 strength, 200 dex. We are stacking a lot of shirking heals. The idea behind stacking shirking heals instead of health is health on this build is worth about like 1.1k HP if you run out of every single piece. Shirking heals, if you dodge once, will be worth more than that, so why not just run shirking heals? Elemental version helps you gap close versus fire staffs. A slash conditioning helps you trade out versus a lot of melee players. You do have to be a little bit careful versus thrust users, but that's why we run thrust protection. We run Onk, which buffs our shirking heals, because every time you dodge, that heal is going to be multiplied by Onk's bonus. Onk is a relatively difficult artifact to get on Fresh, but is still really powerful if you can pick it up. Tumble Feet Wrap seems to be a lot easier to get now, and this is a really good artifact for this build. We did a mock build like this earlier, and we went for Featherweight, but the Shirking Heals cheese is just too strong with this one. You just kind of have to commit to it. It did modify a build from a player called Jordan, who is very good at the game. If you've been around in a while, you'll know him. But he did not go for Thorny Reflection. He did not go for Hasted Vigor. I think these perks are too good to pass up on. Thorny Reflection is just strictly like a DPS buff for basically any build that takes it. I don't really see a reason to not take it. So that's like one thing I've modified for this, but generally stacking Shirking Heals, Elemental Version, Conditioning, and that is like the just for the armor. Onk will multiply all of our heal effects, make them a bit stronger. Mortal Empowerment will just easily get us to the Empower cap. We don't even have to like worry about that anymore. The one weird thing is we need to run less Magnify with this build to hit our stat threshold, so I put an Apex Gold Cursed Earring, which you can just slowly RNG out of the box. Doesn't have to be perfect, or you can run a 700 gear score earring and you will still hit the thresholds fine. You have 5 extra stats with this build, so you can run a low gear score earring and not even have to worry about that, to be honest. And then for Hatchet, we go for Pen Backstab, we go for Shirking Nature, but you could also go for the new Pen Crits, or sorry, Penetrating the Empowered perk, which works if you're critting, and you have a lot of crit chance built in this build if you're hitting someone from behind, so guaranteed crit. Keen Berserk has some crits, so that will help you with that. This build is based off dodging, right? Because you're dodging to proc Tumbler, you're dodging to proc Shirking Heals, so Shirking Nature does make sense, so that's another option there as well. Both of them are very good. Shirking Nature, like any of those Shirking perks, are actually like the highest DPS perk in the game if you can consistently proc it. The issue is most builds can't consistently proc it, but this one has enough stamina regen where it seems like you could pretty easily get to that, and you only need like 1 or 2 hits to kill someone with this build because it just does that much damage. Now, Sword is basically meant to initiate on people, and then Hatchet's meant as like a finishing mechanism. If you're initiating on someone, Empowering Leaping Strike is a really good way to consistently get your damage up. Pen Backstab, always a good perk to run. On our shield, we go Fortified Shield Rush, Keenly Jagged, Vicious, so this is just boosting our damage of our sword and shield. It's going to allow us to do a lot. I took Stone Form as our Heart Rune here as a way to get out. The issue that this build has is that you're really low con, right? but the changes to name tags where you can't actually see people running at you do kind of enable you to be more of an assassin, so that kind of helps with this, but you need lots of ways to regen your HP, which is why for Earring, we go for Healthy Toast, because it's another pot, right, that we could pop to regen a little bit more, and then we can use that with health pots, with regen serums, with the flame conditioning pots, and just like kind of overall make us a little bit stronger. I'd say this is a really expensive build to run in OPR, but if you're looking to drop 60 plus kills in an OPR and you want that potential, this is definitely the build for it. I expect this build to be nerfed within a month or two, but knowing AGS, they're going to wait for the data to come in, and then they're going to realize that Hatchet's doing really good and then tone down the Hatchet, but that's going to take them a long time to get to that point, because they've spent the first 2 weeks of this release just addressing bugs, and it feels like they haven't even addressed like 10% of the bugs so far. So I would say this is probably going to be meta for a decently long amount of time, and overall, it's a very, very solid build. I'll leave a link to this build in the description, and we're slowly adding builds to a site that should be live shortly, and then that will be on there as well. I don't think any of these trees are real. There's not too much to talk about. The main thing that I think people can mess up with this build is Berserk is a cleanse, and it can be used offensively. If you identify someone's running a Void Gauntlet, I would never use Berserk offensively. You will just die. But if someone is running a Void Gauntlet, I'd probably keep your distance if they are, and use this Berserk defensively. It's also just not a bad idea to hold this as a defensive tool, but if you're using it as a defensive tool, then Keen Berserk won't feel as good. Maybe you go for like Refreshing Torrent, because that's another very solid perk to go for in that kind of circumstance. But I think you have plenty of tools to escape. I don't think you have to hold this if you run Stone Form, but it's something to consider. With that being said, let me know what you guys think of this build, if you've run into it at all on OPR, because I sure have, and it is a nightmare to deal with until I figured out the blocking trick. And I expect this to be meta for basically every single form of content. Even War, I think this will be used to some extent. I don't know if people will be as greedy with the stat line, like maybe they'll go a little bit lower on the dex, a little bit lower on the strength, and then try to up the con a bit. But it's really, really hard to do that now with the magnify changes, so I don't expect too much to shift from this. If you have a healer that's pocketing you too, like, oh my god, it is a dirty build. It will do everything that you want it to do. Like you can see here, without me modifying the fact that it has more empower from this, like your base attack is hitting for 2.9k. This is really going to be a lot higher than this. Like if I open up the calculator, like you should be at the crit damage is going to be boosted by 20%, right, because of Keen Berserk, so that's another bonus. I think your base damage is going to be a little bit higher because this doesn't really take into account the strength conditional, so I'll boost up by like another 30%. Your armor penetration is a thing, but we're not attacking a player right now, so it doesn't really matter. I could still put in like what it is and see if it changes the formula here, but it shouldn't. Yeah, it doesn't. Awesome. And it's gonna be silly, man. Like this thing is not fair. You're at the empower cap, consistently have really high base damage. You're hitting for 3.5 to 4.7k per auto attack. That's not including like any of the bonuses that we're talking about here with the shirking. It's not talking about like going for crits all the time, which are obviously hitting a lot higher. It's just a really, really solid build to go for. So let me know what you guys think about that one. We're slowly adding these other builds to basically a repository too, so that we can keep track of which ones are Abyss a little bit better, and I can kind of distribute those a little easier. And I'll see you guys in the next video.